to Capitol Tonight, Democratic Congressman Lloyd Doggett back in the district for a few days and joining me now. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come talk to us.
Good to be home and to visit with you.
Well, we appreciate it. And I wanted to first start off with last week you were part of that 26-hour sit-in on the House floor demanding a vote on gun legislation, and some developing news today with House Speaker Paul Ryan saying that the House will vote on some bills or a bill next week. Have you heard much about what that could entail and whether you guys will be this?
Well, I think it's a hopeful development. This was an extraordinary tactic. It came after everything else had failed and we could not get any action on gun violence. The next day after we completed this protest, 4 Republicans filed a piece of legislation that did deal with this no-fly, no-buy, but provide some due process rights for those after they're denied a gun purchase, not before. And I think that's a good step forward. We just heard this afternoon that Speaker Ryan says he will put this on the floor. There are many ways he can do that, and I hope that it's structured in a way that really does permit a bipartisan vote on this. I'm ready to support this Republican measure. I think it accomplishes much, but if it's I could see how it could be shaped by the National Rifle Association in a way that forces a no vote. And so I hope it will be done in a truly collaborative way. We're out this week, and so we'll find out soon if this is a change in course as a result of our protest or just more of the same.
Is there, a chance for another sit-in if it's not what you guys would want?
I doubt it. Yeah, I've never participated in anything like this in 2 decades in Congress. I think John Lewis brings great moral authority from having used the sit-in effectively in the civil rights struggle. But most people, I think, really don't realize that without approval of the Speaker, we can't consider a bill, we can't offer an amendment. And it just, one tragedy after another where all the House does is have a moment of silence and then weeks, months of inaction. And so we saw this as kind of a final response to attract national attention, and it worked. And I think the kind of national day of action we had yesterday in San Antonio and in Austin and around the country helps bring the attention that can bring them.
What kind of conversations have been going on, with your colleagues across the aisle since the sit-in and just trying to kind of craft legislation or get something to the floor that could be a good compromise?
Not a significant number, because we were there for 25 hours straight, and then everybody left. The Republicans recessed the Congress in the middle of the night, left legislation pending there, and left town. So the contact has been limited. The most important contact is the fact that these 4 Republicans were willing to challenge their leadership and file a bill that was consistent with what we were seeking in the protest.
Do you think some substantial change is possible?
I think it's modest change. I think it's really indefensible to say someone who's too dangerous to fly with us on an airplane ought to be able to get all the assault weapons they want. And that's the way the law is now. And so we're dealing with that one egregious provision. It does not deal with many of the other questions we raised about reasonable background checks on gun sales over the internet and at gun shows, on the fact that gun violence should be explored as a public health problem. They're prohibiting even investigation of it. And I think we should add to that an assault weapons ban, because those guns are only to kill humans. Their bullets tumble in a way that tears up a maximum amount out of flesh and does the kind of damage you expect in a war, but we ought not to have a war by civilians on civilians.
While I have you here, I wanted to get to a couple of other issues. Medicaid therapy rate cuts, a big story here in the state, and a story we've been following closely and talked about a little bit earlier in the show, but you have been getting involved in writing a letter to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. Why are you getting involved with this?
Well, it's just really outrageous to balance the state budget on the backs of 60,000 children with disabilities here, serious disability like cerebral palsy and spina bifida, and to reduce the rates for those who provide them therapy that is really important to their families. And so seeing that, and seeing that the children and their families lost in the court battle here at the Court of Appeals level, though I hope the Supreme Court will respond, and acting as the top Democrat on the Human Resources Subcommittee, I've asked the federal agency that supervises Medicaid to review this, because I don't think that Texas is fulfilling its responsibilities under the Medicaid law. These are mostly federal dollars that are being spent here, and they ought to be to meet the needs of these families. It's really wrong to deny these services.
Have you heard anything so far?
We have been in touch and asked them. They say they're reviewing the request. I hope they're reviewing carefully the failure here in Texas and will act to try to turn back that cutback in access to services.
Zika funding stalled in the Senate past week. I think when we had you on last time, we were talking about it on the House side of things. What now, and how do you come to a compromise with this and move forward and try to get some funding in place?
Well, this is really troubling, because I think this can be a serious problem and result in many babies being born with the kind of abnormality that we saw in Florida this week. I think it can threaten our economy. I believe my Republican colleagues really underestimated the severity of this when they denied $4 out of $5 that the Center for Disease Control requested. This is linked to our protest, because last Thursday in the wee hours of the morning, for the first time since I've been in Congress, they presented a bill that they prohibited any debate at all, not even a word for it, and passed that bill, a partisan bill on Zika funding that does not adequately address the problem. That is what's pending in the Senate. I hope we can come together next week, because those mosquitoes that are out so prevalent now in our area, it's going to take more than bug spray and fly swatter to deal with it. We really do need them to work with us to supply the needs that we have concerning mosquitoes and Zika. And even this week we heard that without adequate funding, they won't be able to proceed with vaccine development. And I think we very desperately need that.
Congressman Lloyd Doggett, thanks so much for stopping by the studios, and we will get you back when you're in town next time.